In this JavaScript video, we're going to be talking about functions, more specifically, returning a value from a function. So we have two numbers, number and another number. Let's create a function and let's just make it an add function. And we're going to pass it in two values, two numbers, n1 and n2. And right now, let's just log out to make sure this works. n1 plus n2. Now we need to call this function in order for it to do something. We're going to pass in number and then also pass in another number. And we should get 7, sure enough. Now, what we want to do from here is we want to multiply whatever the sum of these two numbers is by another number from the user. So the user is going to choose a number, and then we're going to multiply it by the sum of these two numbers. So let's create another function, and let's create multiply. And we'll do n1 and n2 again. And let's console out n1 times n2. And then down here, after we add them up, let's go ahead and multiply them. So we're going to multiply and then we're going to get a value from the user. So we're going to prompt them to enter a number. It's kind of spacing things out so it looks a little bit easier to read. And then we want to also multiply whatever they asked or whatever they told us by the sum of these two numbers. So how do we do that? Because this add function just prints out the sum of them, but it just prints out over here, but I can't use that number down in here. So what I need to do is I need to return a value from this function. So instead of printing this out, I'm going to return the sum. So now it's going to add the two numbers, it's going to return it, but where is it going to return it to? It's going to return it wherever I called the function from. Now, since this is 4 and 3, 4 is going to be n1, another number has the value of 3, and that's going to be n2. So this is going to be 7. So this whole thing right here is going to be replaced by the number 7. But this does nothing. 7 semicolon doesn't do anything. We need to hold that value of 7. So what we need to do is we need to make a variable that holds their sum. So var sum equals. So again, this whole thing is going to be replaced by the number 7 because we have 4 and 3. And then we have var sum equals 7. That makes a little bit more sense. Now the value or the variable sum has a value of 7. And then we can use sum down into our multiply function. So we can pass that into sum. So now if we run this, it's going to ask us for a number, let's say 6. We already know that these two numbers added equal 7. So it's going to take 6, pass it into n1. It's going to take the sum of the two added, which is 7, and put it in for n2. It's going to do 6 times 7, and then it's going to log that out. And then we get 42. Now, everything works good, except usually we want our function to be very specific on what it does. So we don't always want to print stuff out over to the console every time we multiply. All we wanted to do is multiply two numbers and give us the value back. So we're actually going to change this one to a return statement also. All I wanted to do is return. And then later on in my program, I can decide what I want to do with that value. In this case, sure. Let me just log it out so the user can see what's happening here. So what am I going to log out? Well, I want to log out whatever this ends up being when these two numbers are multiplied. So I need to make yet another variable, and we'll call it product. So the product of those two numbers is going to be equal to this function, and then product is what we're going to log out. So let's run this, and let's type in 5, and 5 times 7 is 35. So just a little quick review here. We have two functions here, and they do something just real specific. Add or multiply the two numbers. They also return that value. One of the most important parts that we tend to forget right away is that when we call the function, we need to make a variable to hold its answer, or to hold what's being returned from it. So this ends up returning the number 7. 7 gets passed into here. And now whatever this ends up being, let's say I entered the number 3. So now it's going to be 3 times 7. So now this is going to hold 21. And then it's going to log out 21.